Welcome to the debate, the recent release of extensive legal documentation, stemming from materials related to the Capitol gridlock and Capitol confrontation cases, has really compelled a necessary re-examination of the organizational structure behind Jeffrey Epstein's abuse network. Specifically, these records force us to confront the role of Ghislaine Maxwell. We know she was integral. But the critical question emerging from these depositions and court motions is this. Does the evidence establish Maxwell as the active architect and principal agent who, designed the network's manipulative operational strategy? Or do the records primarily depict her as a complicit high-level employee whose expertise lay mainly in, say, facilitating logistics and executing these really calculated legal defense strategies? I contend that when you really map the operation revealed in these documents, Maxwell was the chief engineer. The evidence, I believe, overwhelmingly positions her as the indispensable principal agent who built the recruitment framework and established the core manipulative modus operandi.
I see why you would gravitate toward that structural analysis. However, where I struggle with that perspective is defining architect. I mean, while Maxwell's deep culpability is undeniable, the transcripts confirm she was vital to running the household and, vetting people. I kind of come at it from a different angle. The defining feature of her involvement, as illuminated by these specific legal records, seems to be her expertise in maximizing legal distance and plausible deniability. Her role, in essence, feels more like operational protection and institutional concealment. It's characteristic of a protected high-level operative rather than necessarily the singular originator of the criminal idea itself.
Okay, let's dive into position statements then. I want to focus immediately on the operational strategy, the MO that really defined this network. The core MO was the weaponization of employment, right? The conversion of a seemingly legitimate job offer into sexual exploitation. Virginia Giuffre alleged this pattern, and, Johanna Sjoberg's testimony provides what I see as the mechanical proof that Maxwell established this exact trap. Sjoberg explicitly stated she was recruited by Maxwell, initially just for answering phones. But that recruitment quickly morphed, as Sjoberg recalled, into a request for massages at $100 an hour rubbing feet, leading directly to Epstein's sexual demands. This shift from an administrative task to sexual labor, that is the MO, and Maxwell was allegedly right at the nexus of recruitment. She even reportedly gave Sjoberg money specifically to bring over another young woman who worked at a restaurant. This isn't just passive logistics. This is actively designing the system of bait and switch.
That is a powerful description of the recruitment funnel she managed. I'll grant you that. But let's pivot for a second to the strategy she executed once challenged legally. If she was the primary architect of the criminal framework, as you suggest, why does the record show her primary effort was so dedicated to evasion and concealment? Her deposition transcripts are, frankly, a masterclass in stonewalling. She repeatedly refused to answer fundamental questions, often invoking just absolute lack of recollection, claiming, "I don't recall," or "I have no idea," regarding highly significant documented facts. For example, claiming she couldn't recall even one of the dozens of times she flew on Epstein's planes with Miss Giuffre when Miss Giuffre was underage. That's quite something. And crucially, her legal defense relied heavily on invoking privilege related to consensual adult sex to refuse questioning about her sexual activities with alleged adults. Now, as the court filings highlight, the strategic benefit of this tactic was precisely to obscure the ages of these alleged adults, and indeed whether they were adults at all. This very calculated legal strategy suggests her indispensable role was maximizing deniability, specifically regarding minors, a function more aligned with high-level concealment, not necessarily the originating criminal intent.
Okay, let's dig into contention 1 then, Maxwell's direct knowledge and establishment of the MO. You frame her as sort of managing logistics, but the documents show she was managing the sexual outcome. We see this, I think, most clearly in the aftermath of Sjoberg's refusal to follow through on Epstein's sexual demands. Sjoberg testified that Maxwell became angry because Sjoberg, quote, didn't finish the job, and Maxwell allegedly said she had to finish it for you. This strongly implies that the job Maxwell hired her for was, in fact, sexual gratification for Epstein. And to solidify this control, Sjoberg alleges Maxwell withheld a camera she had previously bought for her. This is crucial, but withholding of material goods, the expression of anger, the implied sexual expectation tied directly to the job, it clearly positions Maxwell as managing the sexual aspect of the work. The MO simply cannot function without her personally enforcing the sexual terms.
It is absolutely true that she enforced the environment, no question there. But I think we must be careful to distinguish between the, let's say, operation of the household and the establishment of criminal intent. Maxwell consistently compartmentalized her duties, or at least that's the picture her defense painted. Her legal team successfully framed her role as limited to non-criminal tasks like answering phones or interviewing potential staff. Her constant, almost robotic invocation of non-recollection, claiming she couldn't recall even one of over 300 flights, that isn't necessarily a sign of guilt in the initial design, but rather the execution of a highly effective defense mechanism. It was designed to insulate her from admitting criminal intent. She distances herself, legally speaking, from the explicit criminal MO, even while all this circumstantial evidence, like her proximity to the victims and her presence during questionable events, places her right at the center of the environment. Her strategic value, perhaps, was her ability to maintain a public and legal distance, even when physically present.
Right, but that systematic use of denial brings us directly to contention too. The effectiveness, or maybe the purpose, of Maxwell's strategy of non-recollection and legal privilege. You suggest this is merely a defense, but I contend the defense is part of her operational culpability. This strategy forced plaintiffs to expend enormous resources just to prove basic, often undeniable facts. By claiming lack of recollection on central issues, like whether Giuffre stayed at any of Epstein's 6 homes, she shifted the burden entirely onto the victims. They were forced to call multiple corroborating witnesses, people like former house manager Juan Alessi, police detective Joe Reckery. This tactic successfully delays justice and burdens the victim, illustrating that her primary role included executing a deliberate, high-level defense strategy long before she was ever charged.
I agree that the legal tactic placed an enormous burden on the plaintiffs. Absolutely. But for me, that burden underscores her function as a high-level insider, specializing in institutional protection. Her job in this context, arguably, was to provide plausible deniability for the entire enterprise. The sheer volume of her non-recollections, over 300 instances of claiming "I don't recall" in just one deposition, it showed a calculated, really high-wire act designed to limit her personal testimony. It forces the court to rely on what are known as adverse inferences, drawn from her co-conspirators' invocation of the Fifth Amendment, rather than on her direct admissions. That's a highly successful legal chess move, isn't it? Focusing on insulating the structure rather than proving she was the hands-on designer of the initial sexual exploitation MO.
What consider the legal strategy regarding consensual adult sex. The refusal to answer questions by claiming they involved this privilege essentially made her the gatekeeper of discovery. By invoking this shield, she, in effect, confirmed the plaintiff's claim that her actions were designed to block exploration of whether the alleged adults were minors at all. This wasn't just managing logistics, this was actively using her legal position to conceal the ages of victims. And furthermore, Giuffre's complaint specifically alleges that Maxwell directed her to have sex with politically and financially powerful people, Prince Andrew, a hotel chain owner, Marvin Minsky, others. This elevated her role far beyond a simple recruiter. She was strategic, leveraging sex for Epstein's financial and political gain. This level of strategic command, I think, confirms her position as the indispensable principal agent in the larger trafficking aspect of the enterprise.
Okay. Let's move to contention 3 then. The evidence from corroborating witnesses versus Maxwell's own self-description.
Right. The sheer weight of third-party testimony, I think, completely undermines Maxwell's very limited self-description. Juan Alessi, the house manager, noted that many of the masseuses appeared to be 16 or 17 years old.
And Schoberg confirmed seeing Virginia Roberts, who was underage at the time, with Prince Andrew and Maxwell in the New York mansion. These accounts place Maxwell physically at the center of the trafficking operation, managing the access, facilitating these encounters, regardless of her denials. Her personal claims, like denying she never observed any inappropriate underage activities with Jeffrey ever, are simply, well, they're refuted by the collective picture provided in these documents.
I concur that the corroborating witnesses paint a damning operational picture, absolutely. However, my point remains focused on Maxwell's role definition within that operation, especially from a legal standpoint. While others testified to the reality of the trafficking environment, Maxwell's defense, it seems, successfully limited the scope of her own testimony. She maintained her personal legal position that she never arranged for or asked Ms. Giuffre to have sex with anyone. This forced the legal argument to be built largely on circumstantial evidence and the behavior of others, rather than her direct admission of culpability for the core MO. Her effectiveness as a strategic high-level manager is arguably proven by her ability to remain present for key events, yet legally deflect the criminal intent away from herself.
Okay, so wrapping up. When we synthesize the information in the Capital Gridlock and Capital Confrontation files, we really do see two competing but perhaps overlapping portraits. The evidence pointing to the pattern of recruitment, the implied sexual expectation tied directly to her actions, like the camera incident, the demand to finish the job, combined with her physical presence during key alleged trafficking events, it confirms for me that Maxwell was not merely a complicit assistant. She was an active principal who weaponized employment opportunities and social access to feed the abuse network, making her, in my view, the primary architect of the operational mechanism.
And yet, the complexity of the legal record demands that we acknowledge that her systematic use of denial, the lack of recollection, the reliance on legal privileges, this represents a key defining role in itself. Her expertise, it seems, was maximizing operational effectiveness while simultaneously minimizing legal exposure. She was a crucial high-level manager focused on institutional protection and strategic denial. That's certainly an integral part of the crime, but it's not necessarily definitive confirmation that she originated the sexual criminal intent or the MOO itself.
These legal documents certainly reveal a sophisticated mechanism of operation and denial. They underscore how truly challenging it is to penetrate the real organizational structure of an enterprise built on such calculated secrecy and plausible deniability. Thank you for engaging with these complex materials on The Debate.